Hi everybody. I am probably standing in the way, but if I stand here, Bubblina's going to go up my skirt, so yeah, I may just end up doing this. So yes, I'm the executive editor for digital for Trinity Mirror on Merseyside. I work for the Liverpool Post and Echo, and I'm working, I guess, in an industry that's in crisis at the moment. Nobody here can probably say they aren't aware of the newspaper industry's problems right now. Papers closing, papers going weekly, layoffs, redundancies, talks of strikes. Where I stand in all this is I do indeed have an obsession, as Katie said, with the idea of online social media and the need for newspapers to become involved in this and to re-engage with their communities by actually using the tools that are out there, as opposed to remaining kind of isolated and in information silos, which we've done for so long. So I guess the examples I could have used would have been the Iran elections and the Hudson River plane landing, which, you know, very famous kind of social media citizen journalism events. What I thought was, since it's Liverpool, we'd go hyper-local and we would look at, as an example, the day the crane fell down, which has got proper noun status actually. And because cranes falling down aren't actually unknown in Liverpool. But what was interesting about this one was that it was basically, I think, probably the first time in my experience, which is like over the last 5 years of being in Liverpool, when networks had come together and individuals were organised to be able to actually report on what was happening independently of the local newspaper. And I kind of look on it as the rise of social networking, and it has actually got a proper term now, which is social journalism. So, citizen journalism, I guess everybody's familiar with that phrase. Just move down a bit. Okay, so citizen journalism, a label. UGC, user-generated content, another label. Social media and mainstream media, if you mash them all up, you get what's known as social journalism. And it is basically a huge opportunity for journalists. Now, when I say journalists, I'm talking about people who are basically paid by news companies. I would say that there is a school of thought, which I do subscribe to, that we are all journalists and that we are all reporting things all the time. But just for the purpose of this, we'll look on it as the ones who are paid to do it. Social journalism includes, but isn't exclusive to, scanning Twitter, using the hashtags on there, YouTube, Flickr, various other forms of social media to cover real-time events. And the basic river of information that flows through online channels is there for journalists to be able to dip into, I think. There is, I believe, a price, if you like, that journalists have to pay for that, and it's not one that we're particularly used to paying, and that is that we have to give back and engage and be a part of the online communities, and as well as the real world communities that we want to use for our news gathering operations. And I think this is where there's a real fundamental kind of problem for an awful lot of people within the news industry, and it's why right now we are in something of a mess in terms of trying to get our heads around how we move forward. It's a real sort of cultural thing, I think. For the last probably 200 years, you know, since Charles Dickens was nipping down to Parliament, you've had a journalist who controls the news. You know, if they control whether something's a story, when it goes in, how it's presented, what slant is put on it, and crucially, I think, when it stops being a story. Now, everybody tells stories, everybody can get the information out. You don't need to ring up your local newspaper, your local radio. You can blog, you can tweet, you can put up photo stories on Flickr, you can live stream your news around the globe like instantly, and you can put it there for posterity on YouTube. This is something I think that newspapers kind of started out resenting and are now starting to realise is an opportunity. The way things used to work and the way things probably worked about up till, I'd say, 4 or 5 years ago, certainly for the last sort of decade, was you get to hear an event, somebody rings you up, you get a contact, tip you off, tell you what's going on, you might get a letter into the editor. Remember when people wrote letters? You might get an email. If you're a reporter and you get that piece of information, you check it out, you call your contact, you might call the police, ask them what's going on, and then your news editor will send you out. You might take a photographer with you. Possibly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, you might dash out a few paragraphs that would go on the newspaper website and sit there while you went out. You'd go out, you'd talk to everybody who was there, you get your eyewitnesses, you might phone your copy back from the scene, or you might go back to the office. Photographer would probably send the image electronically and go on to another job. Content would go on the newspaper website, no promotion. And as a reporter, you go back, you'd start working on the story for the next day. You might follow it up the day after that. But really, your engagement with everybody who was involved in that story would end at that point. This is how it changes for me now. I love him, actually, I really do. It's just rare that he's got bubbles in him, because usually I meet him at tweet-ups, and he's been so heavily used, he's run out of gas. Anyway, social journalism, how it works. You get your potential news story through an entire raft of different methods. It might be the traditional ways, it could be a tweet, you might be on WikiLeaks, you might be on YouTube, and as happened to me, spot that a whole bunch of little shits in Dovecot have posted photos of themselves waving double-barrel shotguns around. You crowdsource on the same networks to find out what's going on. You check out the facts that way. You speak to people who are actually involved in it, and you bring your audience into it. If you're smart, you bring your audience into it. You use hashtags to promote that conversation, and it grows. You don't end it. You basically, as a reporter, you file your part of it and you throw it back out and you see where it goes from there. So this is the example of July the 6th, 2009. The first 2 editions of the Echo had gone out. It was fairly kind of normal day. I think they already had, I'm just going to shift this way, a splash lined up for the next day. And then somebody rang in, because Liverpool is that kind of a place where people do still ring the local paper. They rang in and they said, I think a crane might have fallen down. Kind of almost instantly to that, Tom Shannon popped up in my tweet deck and said, I just realised a crane has fallen down. So I shouted across to the news desk, and they said they were already spoken to a reporter. They didn't know how bad it was. So I sent a message back to Tom to say Samantha Parker, reporter on Twitter, was on her way down, didn't know how bad it was. He didn't need to answer me, because at the same time he was just posting a twit pic, which was the first slide I showed, which I think was taken through binoculars on an iPhone, which I have to say, I tweeted that, and the Mac community just went mental with excitement that an iPhone could do such a thing. Anyway, so there was that information exchange, and Stu at Fact, who I think's here somewhere as well, also took a twit pic showing what had happened, sent that out, and Peter Carr, who is an extraordinary photographer and blogger in Liverpool, just sent a message out saying, I don't know where that is. I'm in Duke Street, and I'd like to go and take pictures, but I don't know. And I did. So I sent a message back to him saying, it's just behind Chandler's Wharf. And at that point, because we didn't have any information back on what was happening from our journalist, on our Twitter streams, we parcelled up what we did know, which was there are a couple of images here from people who've seen what's happening and who are telling the world what's happening. And here they are. Followed up by, at that point, the news online, eyewitness reports, photo galleries. We had, I think at that point, twigged that a hashtag might be a good idea on this. And we linked to it, said there's more to come. Tom jumps back in, obviously not a busy day in the office, and retweets Liverpool Echo News, which is great because the people who follow the Echo aren't necessarily the same people who follow Tom, aren't the same people who follow me. Bizarrely, most of Norway follows Liverpool Echo News, I think, because they think any minute John Arne Riise is going to suddenly crop up again. But again, we were just reaching entirely different audiences with that. And the end result was just, I sat down and I gathered it all together, and I was really a bit blown away by it all. Pete Carr had an entire Flickr set with his own little news report of what he'd seen. There was the post on the Echo, BBC, which I would just like to add, didn't get anything up until late in the afternoon. So we beat them. You could search for Crane on Twitter and you got a whole raft of things. YouTube report, Rob on the Culture blog did his own news report of it with pictures. Joe Neary, another Flickr photographer, was out, saw that. And I love these two. Twitter is better than the news for coverage of the Liverpool crane collapse. What crane collapse? Somebody else who doesn't know about it, so somebody else is getting news from Twitter. And to be frank, it was that day. The social media was a far more effective way of us being able to be a part of the story and break the news and get out what was happening. At one point, people were saying the crane driver was dead. He wasn't, and he is recovering. But with journalists back in the office, we could take that information that was passing around, we could look at it, distill it, check it out, and actually push facts back. And for me, that's kind of where the role of newspapers will come now. And they may not be printed in a few years' time, they may just purely be online. But what I think they will be is areas where people who have stories to tell will be able to basically get distilled facts from journalists who are using these networks to be able to look at information in this stream that is flowing all the time. And it's everything from what you had for breakfast, and I know some people are interested in that, right the way through to what Stephen Fry is doing, to, an Egyptian journalist has just been arrested, as happened to a friend of mine a few months ago, and a massive online campaign was organised to free him, and in 2 days he was free. And that is, for me, where we need to be looking now, how we need to be moving forward and learning, basically. Because it's very easy when you work in a newspaper to think, I know everything, I am a paid questioner, I am paid to find the information. The problem is that there are so many people out there now who ask questions, great questions, and get the answers. And we haven't evolved far enough. We are, I think, starting to, but we're a long way behind where we should be. And this is why I get very frustrated when there's a new blog that's just started up now, which is being written by somebody quite senior in the industry who's anonymous, that is basically dismissing all of this. Because it's arrogance to say that journalism belongs only to those who are paid to produce it. It's something that everybody's involved in. Reporting news is something we do all the time, whether we're in the pub talking to somebody or whether we're sat at a computer writing something for a front page. And so for me, social journalism, and the more noise the better, please.